Hey y'all, welcome back to Most of It. Elves are a constant in pretty much every fictional/fantasy setting, and I can't really stand any of them. But there's one group of pointy-eared folk that have particularly earned my ire, and that's the Eldar in 40K. But why is that? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today. Disclaimer, most of what you'll hear in this video is my opinion, and I'm in no way trying to discourage you from liking what you like. If you like Eldar and Drukhari, more power to you, I just don't. Also, I understand what I say may or may not make perfect sense, but I don't really care. But with all that out of the way, let's get into this. The Eldari's beginning as a race is actually pretty cool, I'll admit. They were originally created by the Old Ones as essentially living weapons to fight the Necrons and the Catan. And that's really cool. So what's their preferred form of battle? Oh, psychic? Great. Something you may have picked up about me if you see my videos is that I'm not that into psychic groups. I'm not really into Thousand Suns, and Khorne is my favorite Chaos God. This isn't an Eldar specific fault, but mainly psychic factions often just end up as the random BS go groups, with them often winning because of something vague magic. This is of course a issue with 40k as a whole, like with pretty much any named Ultramarine being able to solo all of Chaos, but I see it far more often in psychic factions. But moving on from that, the Eldar helped the old ones out until they were destroyed and the Necrons went to sleep, and then they just kind of started doing their own thing. They built their own empire aside their gods, and were the main cause of the Necrons choosing to go to sleep rather than keep conquering. That's impressive, I'll give them that. Intimidating the dudes that just shattered gods of real space is quite the feat. They have free reign of the galaxy for about 60 million years, and what do they have to show for it? Well, you see that massive hole in reality that's home to some of the worst dangers the galaxy's ever seen? Yep, that's the Eye of Terror, and it's all the Eldar's doing. Over their time as the main galactic superpower, the Eldari got bored. As essentially immortal beings, nothing really scratched their itch after a while, and eventually their entertainment evolved into essentially a massive blood orgy. Some Eldar weren't really into this and dipped, but those that continued eventually birthed Slaanesh. The god's birth is what created the Eye of Terror and gave the galaxy a whole new threat. This is my next anti-Eldar point. Many factions have messed up. The Necrons gave up their souls, which most of them regret doing. The Imperium elevated Horus to a position of power and didn't monitor him properly. But these mistakes ultimately really only affected themselves. The Necrons regret their biotransference, but ask any other race and they probably won't even know what you're talking about. Same with the Imperium. Horus's rebellion would have really only resulted in humanity's destruction. The Eldar, on the other hand, made a new evil god, and a very convenient doorway for all of Chaos to get into real space. They put the whole galaxy in danger because they couldn't keep it in their pants. And when Slaanesh was born, she almost single-handedly wiped out nearly the whole Eldar pantheon, and the only one that was able to do anything was Cain, who only hurt Slaanesh before she shattered him. Meanwhile, the Emperor, who was just one dude, had he embraced and ascended to become the Dark King, would have destroyed all of Chaos and probably the universe along with it. There wouldn't be anyone left to appreciate the victory, but you can't say he wouldn't have been effective. But the whole Eldar pantheon, except for one, couldn't even make a scratch on just one Chaos God, and a newborn one at that. Granted, she had eaten a bunch of Eldar souls, but still, come on guys, protect the dudes worshipping you. But moving on from that, after Slaanesh's birth, the Eldar effectively had their backs broken. Their numbers are heavily decreased, and the second they die, they are consumed by Slaanesh unless they backed up their souls to their servers. Their psychic powers got heavily nerfed as well, meaning they can't really use them to the degree that they used to, or Slaanesh will find them and eat them. All of this could have been avoided if they had some foresight. Oh wait, they did. Many foresaw what was coming and tried to warn the others about it and were ignored. Okay, so start knocking heads. If you kill at least some of the Orgy Eldar, then that would have slowed something down, right? But most of it, they could just respawn after death and continue what they were doing. Yeah, but at least while they were dead, they wouldn't be feeding a disaster in the making. It probably wouldn't have been a long-term solution, but come on, they could have done something other than just leave. If you've been warned about something of that magnitude, I think you have a responsibility to try to manage it, at least to some degree. But okay, Slaanesh is born, the Eye of Terror is here, and the Eldar are shattered and fleeing. What's their next move? Well, as I mentioned earlier, the Craft Worlders began backing up their souls to Spirit Stones, and when they died, it would snatch their soul from Slaanesh, and it would be deposited into something called the Infinity Circuit aboard their ships. Smart thinking. But now that they were no longer the galactic superpower, another race stepped up to fill that void, and humanity became number one. This is where the Eldari get really insufferable for me. As humanity expanded across the stars, the Eldar began referring to them as Monkai. Supposedly this is because humanity reminded them of a race with that name that they saw as savages, so they use it as a roundabout way to call humans savages. But I think we all know the truth here. The Eldar look down on humanity and see them as lesser beings, thus, monkey. It's that simple. Now, 40K is no stranger to space racism, both of the casual and competitive variety. But seriously? You have the gall, after dooming your entire race and possibly the galaxy as a whole, to criticize anybody? The Eldar are like an old dude that during high school was a star football player. He was really good at it and was on top of it for a while, but then immediately fell off and became addicted to heroin. Would you take any advice from that guy? Because I know I wouldn't. The Eldar had their time in the spotlight and they squandered it harder than anybody else. And you may say, well, as an ancient race, they have at least a lot of experience, so they must be very wise, right? You'd think that, wouldn't you? But no, they're not. I'll give you an example here. In the book Fulgrim, great read by the way, check it out if you haven't already, Fulgrim is contacted by the Eldar Farseer Eldrad Ulthrun, and they meet up. The Emperor's children were already pretty far down the Slaanesh rabbit hole at this point, so keep that in mind. Eldrad tells Fulgrim that he's foreseen the Horus heresy and that something has to be done about it. Fulgrim, who at this point is wielding the Lair Blade and is regularly being tempted by a greater demon of Slaanesh, gets mad at the mere suggestion that Horus would do that and attacks the Eldar and kills a Wraith Lord and a freaking avatar of Cain. First off, side tangent here, people say that it's ridiculous that Fulgrim could kill them, but here's the thing. I totally believe that he could do this, especially while wielding the Lair Blade. That thing was home to a keeper of secrets, and so I'd imagine it would do extra damage to any Eldari being. I will, however, agree with you that the way he killed the Avatar of Cain was stupid, as the way they work is the Eldar keep a stone or metal statue of the god around, which someone has to be sacrificed in order to awaken. So how did Fulgrim kill it? Well, he choked it out. Yeah, he choked a statue to death. That's obviously dumb, but judging by all the other ways Cain's been killed, I personally believe Fulgrim could kill one. But that's not my main point here. Eldrad had something important to tell the Imperium of, and so who does he contact? Does he go through the Imperial Guard? There's a lot of them running around, but nah, they're too low on the totem pole. The info would never make it to anyone important. How about a psychic message to a Primarch or even to a Space Marine? Or better yet, how about the Alpha Legion? They seem to have a halfway decent relationship. No. Instead, Eldrad contacts the Legion with indulgently decorated purple armor that at this point has begun mutilating themselves seeking perfection, and are led by a dude with a freaking Slaanesh demon sword. Fulgrim was standing in front of the guy and he couldn't detect a single hint of corruption? I mean, come on, a blind guy could have seen that coming. At least contact the Yellow Space Marines, they're generally reasonable, sometimes. Bro is millions of years old, has foresight, and still chose, the only wrong option. Just drives me up the wall. And while we're talking about Eldrad, let's go into the Cabal. The Cabal in 40K was a group of many different alien races dedicated to the destruction of chaos. Eldrad was a member of it, and he was even responsible for getting the Alpha Legion to join as well for a bit there. The Cabal foresaw the Horus heresy and concluded that the best thing to do was to let Horus win, which would result in humanity's destruction, and since chaos mainly fed off humanity, most of chaos's power would go with it. They sent an agent of theirs that everybody loves and nobody hates, named John Grammaticus, to do some stuff like assassinating Vulcan and to pick up some important people, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Their whole plan was to let Horus win and watch the Imperium fall. But here's the thing. This supposedly anti-chaos organization's end goal was ultimately the same as chaos. Both the Cabal and Chaos wanted Horus to win, so you'll forgive me if I don't really trust their motivations. And what also goes to prove my point is that the Eldar eventually assassinated most of the Cabal's leadership and destroyed it as a whole. The Eldar seemed to think at the time, and I'd say still kind of do, that humanity's destruction is the only way to defeat chaos. But we're not the ones that created essentially horny space Satan over here and ripped a hole in reality. So how about you get off that high horse and help reopen the Imperial Webway? Please and thank you. And you may say, well, the craft worlders are trying to make up for the race's mistakes, at least give them some credit. But they suck at it. What have the Eldar done to atone/mitigate the consequences of their actions? Because I can't really think of anything. If you want an example of atonement for one's mistakes, look at Zarek the Silent King. That dude exiled himself outside the galaxy for 60 million years, and when he actually did return, he seems like kind of a good guy, telling Dante how he respected Sanguinius and jumping in with both feet on defeating the Tyranids. He knows he messed up, but he also knows that sometimes you gotta make lemonade out of lemons, and so he tries his best. Unlike the Eldar, who are so arrogant, I don't think most of them believe they messed up. But moving on from that, what are the Eldar like in the current setting? Well, they haven't got much better. They're still the guys that talk like they know everything, but always seem to mess up. Like when the Inari tried to awaken the Eldar god of death, Iniad, who was supposedly going to be powerful enough to beat Slaanesh and free the Eldar. They get a ritual going, but it gets interrupted by the Death Watch. And seriously? You're attempting something to save your entire race, and you couldn't get a couple more guys to guard the room you're doing it in? I get it, it's not like they were going to get it to work anyways, as that would change the setting too much, but at least get interrupted by one of the cool groups of Marines. Like, I bet the Salamanders would be happy to interfere with Eldar shenanigans. The Drukhari have continued with what they're doing, and in a world of awful ways to kick the bucket, getting captured by them is somehow one of the worst. They'll torture you and those you love in all manners of ways, all the while feeding you drugs to keep you alive. Then when they're bored of you, they'll turn you into a still-living Hatter couch. I like the Drukhari more than the Craft Worlders just because at least they're honest. They know what they're doing, and we know what they're doing, and they don't really try to be anything else but that. The Harlequins are just kind of there, in both the tabletop and lore sense. The way they operate is so obtuse that you can't really know what's going on with them, and so they're kind of just whatever for me, personally. But it wouldn't surprise me if one day it's revealed that Tzeentch killed Kegarak and took his place, and they've been working for him the whole time, as they kind of operate in basically the same way. I mentioned the Inari earlier, and they're a pretty new group of Eldar, and they've already made their mark. Their leader Yvraine helped get Guilliman back in the setting, and that's pretty cool. I always like to see when they break the conventions of 40k and different races work together. Well, I think I got it out of my system. That's about all I have to say about the Eldar for now. Sorry if it irritated some of y'all, but regardless, these are my opinions / a lore dump about the Eldar, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Again, if you like them, more power to you, I just don't. Thanks for watching, y'all. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and comment down below your thoughts about the Eldar. Be sure to check out my community tab where I'm currently running weekly Primarch battle brackets, and with all that said, I'll see y'all later.